Hey guys, it's Fayon here. Welcome back to another video on the passive hang. Today, I'm going to take you through an approach for how to open up the lateral line of the body. That is the whole side of the body. Now, normally flexion, extension comes very familiar to us, and also rotation, if you can think like a tennis swing. But something I've noticed is this side flexion of the body. It's quite unfamiliar, which is why I want to invite you guys to explore the possibility of exploring this type of movement through what I'm going to show you in this video today. Now, I'm going to actually break this up into a little bit of a mini series in 3 parts. So in the first part, I'm going to take you through micro movements or small frame movements to understand how to tilt the body. In the second part, I'm going to show you some more larger frame, big frame global stretches, which is going to help open up this lateral line. And then we're going to explore how to generate elastic power through these coordinations that I will show you in the third and final part. It's super great stuff. Makes me feel amazing whenever I explore, especially this side part of the body, this side flexion movements. So I'm happy to share what I've found to be very helpful for me with you guys through this mini series. I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get started. So I'm first going to take you through some isolated ways of how to tilt the body. Now, when we think of the lateral line, it's very common, this big side flexion like this, which is one way to train and access it, but I'm going to show you how we can segmentally tilt the body and understand a bit more in how we can access this lateral line other than this big global stretch of reaching over our side like this, which we are going to explore. It is important, but we're going to take this small frame micro movement approach first. So the first one, which is very common, that very easy to understand, is the neck tilt of side to side. So you might have done this before, it's very common. All I'm going to do is, from this standing position, try and reach my ear to my shoulder, and then go the other way as well. So this type of neck tilting is what happens when we tilt over to the side and try to access a big global stretch. So we can isolate this movement and understand a little bit of how our neck operates just by isolating this part up here. So I'm trying to keep the rest of the body still from the shoulders down. So if I go like this and then there's a slight side flexion of the spine, we don't want that. I want to keep a neutral stance here, everything fixed, and then just from the neck up, that's where I want the tilting to happen. So from here, I go, try and reach my ear to my shoulder and oscillate between the 2 positions. Now, I don't have to really strain and try and really jam my neck as much as possible to my shoulder or anything. You can just try to access it by smoothly oscillating through the motion, as smooth as possible without any jankiness, and just try and find a sense of ease of how we can tilt our neck from side to side. Another thing to notice is also if you rotate instead of just pure side flexion. You can do this normally by standing in front of a mirror and then seeing the orientation of the face, whether when you side flex and tilt down this way, is there a little bit of this motion where you're actually facing down or up? And just be aware of that tendency. Why is that happening? Why can't I just perform this neck tilt? Maybe you might have to make it a little bit smaller to actually make it a true neck tilt from side to side like this. And then once you've fixed it up, then you can make it larger. So this is the first part of what we can understand in terms of how we can tilt the body, we're going to get a little bit deeper now. So moving on from the neck and the possibilities of moving it from side to side, we can actually do the same with our ribs. So chest tilts. So with the ribs, and I'm just going to place my hands here on my ribs. You can also do the same when you're first trying this out or when you're practicing. I like to do it because it just gives me a bit of tactile feedback, a bit of sense back to actually how this is moving. And then from here, I'm going to tilt my ribs down on one side and lift it on the other side. So if you can imagine your ribs like this, they're kind of tilting, going up and down, up and down. So here, I'm tilting up and down, and I'm keeping my head fixed and my pelvis fixed as well. So even though my chest is tilting, I'm not trying to get my head to follow with it or my pelvis to move out to the side or anything like that. I'm trying to keep it fixed in position and trying to isolate the motion of the ribs tilting down and up, so it depressing on one side, expanding and rising on the other. Now the tendency here will be just to hike up the shoulder like this and be very scapular, shoulder blade dominant. What we're trying to understand here is a bit deeper through the ribs of how we can actually tilt the ribs and the chest down and up, which is going to be a little bit smaller than just going, okay, I'm doing this shoulder dance type thing, and actually tilting the torso and the spine from one side to the other. When I'm coming down and when I'm coming up, I'm feeling this big lift and also this big contraction to pull this down. So there is a lot of work that's happening here. Even though the movement is very small, and this is a way we can understand now that we actually have this ability to side tilt through the ribs, which again, when we're coming into this side flex position here, happens to some extent, but then when we train this isolated movement, it gives us more awareness, more possibility to side tilt even further. If I think, okay, actually I can put awareness through the ribs and then tilt even further by trying to lengthen and rise with one side and contract and depress another. So this is where the study of this smaller frame micro movements can really help you when piecing together with these larger frame pieces. So with these chest tilts, once again, I'm just going to demonstrate, trying to keep the head and the pelvis fixed, not allow my shoulders or shoulder blades to dominate, and just tilting up and down with the ribs, like so. All right, cool. So, we've done the head, we've done the chest. Now we can move on to the pelvis. And the pelvis, if you see, and I just put my hands here for reference, on the left and on the right, I can drop one side of the hip and hike one side of the hip. And that is a pelvis tilt here. So I do the opposite here, where then I can drop the right side of the hip and the left side of the hip raises. And you can see the level of my hands changing as I drop my pelvis from left and right. And again, I'm just oscillating between these two levels. Now, to actually perform this movement, I'll do it on the side. I'm actually bending my knees slightly on the side of the hip that's dropped. So on this right side here, if you can imagine, I'm dropping that hip and then I have to flex with the knee here. So I bend my knee here to allow that to happen. And there's this side crunch action here where I'm hiking up this side of the hip. And similar like before, I'm not going like this and then dropping like my shoulder or tilting with my neck or anything. I'm trying to keep my shoulders relatively fixed and my head also fixed, and then just access the isolated potential of the pelvis to perform these tilts, which gives these amazing sensations of this like opening on the side that drops down of the body, and then this contracting here all through this side here of the side which is being hiked up. So this one is actually a bit foreign for some people to understand. It can be hard to access. So again, doing it in front of a mirror and then putting your hands on your hips and then seeing, okay, is my hip actually dropping down? Is that one dropping down? Is nothing happening? Like, what's happening here? And you really have to just see, okay, how can I isolate it just to the motion of the pelvis? So we're going to put the pelvis and the rib tilt together now to make a universal spinal tilt. So what this will involve is one side where the pelvis tilts up and the ribs tilt down, and the other side where the pelvis tilts down and the ribs tilt up. So you can imagine this is a side bending action, but now we're confining it to these micro movements of these tilts that we've just practiced before. So one side, I hike my pelvis up and I drop my ribs down. And then the other side, I concentrate on expanding and lengthening this side. But I don't end up in a side flexion, a global side flexion bend where I bend over to one side like this or this. I keep it to these micro tilts of the body that we've been focusing and practicing on. So it'll look like this. And we just oscillate and alternate between the two sides, closing or compressing and expanding. Again, I'm really trying to drive up and expand with my ribs rather than just overly elevate with my shoulder like this, which you can turn into, which isn't necessarily bad, but we're just really trying to expand the torso region here on this lengthening side and then compress that side as well, and understand and connect that sensitivity of the part, the ability of the torso to now really contribute in this lateral tilts of the body. So once more again, I'm tilting up one side of the pelvis and dropping the other side of the pelvis and combining that with this rib tilt action from before by trying to compress and pack down this side as much as possible whilst expanding this side and dropping that hip. And you can see I keep my head fixed, so it becomes this universal spinal tilt combining the ribs and the pelvis. I'll give you a bit of a side view here as well. So when we're practicing these tilts, we're now gaining a lot more awareness of when we access this lateral global flexion movement of bending the spine. This is what actually happens. Now, you might just be normally bending in one point, but then if you bring your attention to how the pelvis tilts and how the rib tilts, you can get a lot more out of it, which is what we're going to play around with the upcoming stretches that I'm going to show you in the next episode of this series. So this universal spinal tilt concept and this concept of tilting segmentally the parts of the body, you can piece it together in other larger, more global frame movements to get a lot out and a lot more sensitivity and awareness as to what your body is actually doing and whether you're just flexing in one point of the body or whether you can recruit more of it now because we've practiced these micro movements of the pelvis, the ribs, and then also the head. So this is where these tools come in really handy by just isolating them at first, expanding your awareness as to what are the possibilities within these micro movements, and then we can use them in other sort of larger frame coordinations. That's all for today, guys. Part one of this mini series, which is understanding the micro motions of the body to open up the lateral line. As mentioned, there's going to be another 2 parts. In the second part, I'm going to go through bigger, larger frame stretches, my favorite stretches for opening up the lateral line, and particular cues and setup to get a lot more out from these stretches. So look out for that one coming soon. Otherwise, if you have any questions, hit me up in the comments, or you can reach me on thepassivehang.com. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in the next video.